thought it might be an interesting segment for today. Not that there's not an abundance of things to talk about in our world, but I thought it would be interesting, and there's a point behind it. You know, I honestly think that it's a lot different today, and I don't mean technological advances in film and television, but I mean that what happened to the message? Is the message the same? Is the message the same that was in, say, Little House on the Prairie as it is in CSI, even though that's a crime show, but still it kind of remains, Is the message the same in old detective shows as it is in something like, I don't know, SVU or whatever they're up to now with these gory police shows? But, I'm not the oldest person, obviously. But I grew up in a household where, even though you kind of had a blank slate, that you had free reign to watch whatever you wanted to, within reason, nothing that was, R-rated or whatever growing up. But my parents were very good about introducing us to classic TV that they thought was just had a good message, whether it was from the 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s, and as well as when you'd visit your grandparents' house, So even though being a 90s kid, we definitely had a very awesome array of television to watch, whether it was comedy or cartoons or something from Nickelodeon, or we caught all the reruns of Looney Tunes, and Cartoon Network had all the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons. And in that respect, I think, even though some people are saying that was the last of the good days of our country or whatever, I think that we could also say that that was definitely a golden age of the collective of the last decades of television and film. And I kind of agree with that self-proclaimed, that self-stated statement. That's the way I see it. I see it that era really saw that decade. You could catch everything from the last 50 years. Three Stooges, Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy. They were all on some channel, and it's all great. But I guess the thing that gave me the idea tonight was that, I often have TV time with my grandmother, who doesn't get many visitors these days, and I always make a point to take an hour or two out of my day to go watch some TV and eat dinner, whatever. And, that's just how I am. Everyone needs some companionship, some company. But it turns into a bonding experience because a lot of these shows had such beautiful messages that you almost forget that this is from a pastime, and you think maybe this is more of a futuristic thing because it seems to give you seem to take something away from it, Whereas TV today almost feels like it's trying too hard to be very diverse and very of the current times. I think TV today is very afraid to keep their audiences thinking existentially, and the less you see on film, the less you see within the program you're watching, the more is left to your imagination. And I think that's true. I had an uncle who was very wise, worked his whole life, was never a college man, never intellectual by intellectual standards, but he was intelligent nonetheless. He was certainly an intellectual in my eyes, but learned a lot just by listening to him and a lot of my old folks. And he made an incredible point one night. He said, Matt, graphics in these movies and special effects can only get so good because, if you read a book, what's better than your imagination? And in that instance, it kind of blew my mind because he's right. when you have a dream, have you ever had a dream where you wake up and you're just like, how the hell did my mind concoct that? I think that's what he was getting at, I think that's what he meant. And I believe that. And when you fast forward a little bit into when TV got popular, every home had a TV, and maybe drifting a little bit out of the mid-50s where there was like copper shows and Highway Patrol and these really kind of good guys always win kind of shows on TV, But when you got into, I think, 1959 to 65, could be a little bit wrong in that time frame, but when shows like the Twilight Zone, Rod Serling's Twilight Zone, and The Outer Limits came into play, it really, I think, changed the landscape of not only TV and science fiction, but of historical fiction, of just many different ideas, and kept people thinking. And with the limited special effects and limited things at their disposal by today's standards, it's pretty incredible what they were able to accomplish by not showing you what you think they'd show you, imagery-wise. I mean, the Twilight Zone in itself was probably the single most influential show on me personally, just because you learn so much about history in some of the episodes where they give you backstories or were alternate histories. And then there was other ones where it was something totally dystopian or totally, out of this world, dealt with time travel, whatever. And you would always take something away from it, and you'd use it. You'd use it throughout your day or growing up, and you kind of lived by like little references to shows like this, So I'm very thankful that I had parents that didn't keep up with the times, so to speak, and only made sure their kids consumed the latest TV shows or talk shows or stuff like that. It was always like stuff where they thought we'd get something out of it because they did or whatever, they enjoyed it. And obviously Twilight Zone, there was no swear words, there was no nudity or excessive violence. There was suggestions of violence, someone gets hit or shot or whatever, but you know what I mean, there was no gore. And I think that added to it, So I'm very grateful for that. And some episodes that stick out to me, even though there's so many, but some that just had a really amazing message. And one of them, I believe, was called Rip Van Winkle Caper, and it's one of my favorite ones. And it was about these 3 bank robbers that, and there's a spoiler alert, so I may have to write that in the description. It was called Rip Van Winkle Caper, and it was about this 3 bandits, and the one head guy was out of the 3, the quote mastermind. And he had this these 3 glass coffins that he had engineered to administer sleeping gas when you lay down in it. And it wasn't no ordinary anesthesia. It would put you to bed for like 30 or 40 years or something, or hundreds of years. I forget what it was. But anyway, these guys rob a bank, and they drive this old armored truck to the middle of, let's say, the Nevada desert for argument's sake. And they go in those glass coffins and hide the money near them. So they go on that. They go, oh, well, when we wake up, all the people looking for us will be dead generationally, and we'll be able to use our money and do whatever. And you're already kind of at the edge of your seat, like, oh man, then what could go wrong, right? But the gas comes over them, they fall asleep, and long story short, they wake up. Or I think if I remember right, one person wakes up, and maybe a stalagmite had dropped and broke the case of the other 2, so it didn't just not let them sleep forever, but their bodies weren't preserved or whatever, so they were skeletons. That was a great mini twist, if I remember right. So the one surviving guy takes all the gold, and he runs out into the street. Or I'm sorry, there was 2 people that survived. That's what it was. So these 2 guys are walking through the desert trying to get to wherever because the truck is broken and won't start. It's too old. And they're walking and walking, and they're running out of water, or they didn't even have any. I forget what it was. But the one guy who was really greedy, he had started charging the other guy to drink from his canteen and give him some of his gold because they both had a share of whatever. So horrifyingly, by the end of their journey almost, the one guy was out of gold because he needed water, and he ended up just dying, or he hit him in the head to get the last of his few pieces left because he was tired of carrying his ass or whatever. So he dies, and it's like a monstrous crime that this guy did in the desert, and they're both in their prison clothes still. So that guy's walking again, the one remaining guy. He finally gets to the road, he's dehydrated, and he collapses. And like a very Batmobile floating car comes out with these 2 very sophisticated, futuristically dressed people. And they see this guy in like archaic numbered clothes or whatever with a bunch of gold bars. And they look at each other, and he said, "Oh, that's interesting, honey. What is that?" And she said, "Oh, that's gold. Back centuries ago, they used to think this was worth something," or something along those lines. So in that new society, their gold was worthless. And I just think it was an incredible, subtle twist. So the guy died poor because he had waited too long into the future, and it was worthless. His whole attempt was in vain, and he died. And those people just looked at him like he was a crazy man. And it just blew your mind when you see that for the first time. You watch the whole episode just to get those twists. Like at the end, the twist was like that was your endorphin or your dopamine high or whatever. Like you were like, whoa, And it went on forever. Like you'd rewatch the episodes, and they were just amazing. But that was one of them. The other one that I really loved was again, the twist. It was all about the twist. And if you'll excuse me, I just got to have a sip. But one of my other favorite ones was with Burgess Meredith, who played Mick in the Rocky series. Played the Penguin, I believe, in Batman, the earlier Batman. Great actor. Awesome actor. But he played in a lot of Twilight Zones, if I'm correct. A lot of other 60s shows he always guest starred in. And this particular one, he was like a bank teller who was very meek and single and no luck with the ladies. No one really cared for him. He just kind of wanted to read his books when he got out of his boring job at the bank. So he keeps getting yelled at by the stern boss, the asshole, a very prim and proper guy. Well, and he had a silly name like Mr. Blinkle or something silly like that you would just make fun of. But that's what added to the genius of Rod Serling's writing and the way the screenplay, whatever. It was just so amazingly put together, the whole show. So one day he's like, I'm going to take my lunch hour and go read in the vault, the bank vault. And, no one knew. So he went in there, and he's just a loner. He has no one to talk to. So Burgess Meredith starts reading his book in the bank vault. Again, spoiler alert, I apologize. But he hears a loud boom, and the whole room shakes. And soon you realize that a nuclear bomb had went off. And the whole world, for what we know, was decimated. He comes outside of the bank vault into the rubble, and I'm guessing because it was like a lead-lined safe bank vault, he was protected. So he's walking around, he realizes no one's alive. Out of nowhere, he just is the last man standing. And he sees that there's a few structures, there's a few buildings, and he knows that the public library is still standing, or partially standing, and all the books are all around. And being a bookworm, reading's the only thing he really loved to do in life. He's like, oh, this ain't so bad. I got all the time in the world to read books. And the way Meredith delivered it is so amazing, and only that way, like someone like an actor like him can do. But he sits on the stoop, and he wears glasses, because he needs them to read or see or whatever. He leans down to get a book, and he drops his glasses, and they break in like a bunch of pieces, or they shatter to the point where he can't see. And then you realize that is the only thing that would make his form of heaven or nirvana worthwhile, was if he could read books. Now he can't read, so it turns into like a hell. And it's just amazing. I mean, the concepts were just frigging amazing for the time. For any time, by today's standards, even more relevant. Even more relevant. And the amazing thing is, back then, over 50 years ago, they touched a lot on race issues, on Nazism, on, I believe, gender, stuff like that. The pursuit of, youthfulness and trying to stay young, and beauty and ugly and, short, tall, fat. He covered everything in that series. And it's just an amazing series. If you haven't ever watched it and heard about it and all the references and everyone knows the riff that opens, definitely check it out. I mean, it's incredible. You'll watch 5 of them in a row with some popcorn and a soda and go, wow, they're all relevant to today. And I guarantee you at least 2 out of 3 you will. You will think that. So that's the one that really stands out to me rather. And later on, quick plug, there's not any platforms I think that offer it right now, but Rod Serling made another short series after that in the early 70s called Night Gallery, which was also awesome. A little more horror oriented, but the same principle. And it was really good. So check that out too if you get a chance. Maybe YouTube's got some clips of it. But yeah, I mean, classic TV was just, it's a league all its own when you compare it to today's stuff. And listen, I respect everyone's opinion. Everyone has different tastes. But I have some family members that watch a lot of game shows. And I just think it's fucking mindless. Now it just seems more mindless than it ever has been. I mean, but, the whole idea of, like, watching other people win pounds and millions of dollars or bags of money or cars, it just seemed to me that it was a bunch of viewers living vicariously through other people. And it disturbed me, when you see an older woman or an older man or just somebody who is addicted to these shows or dating shows or The Bachelor, which is still in the air somehow. I don't know how. But it is, You got to think about the double standards of a lot of these things, Dating shows, you're looking for true love, right? They say The Bachelor has 25 women. He's looking for true love. But I mean, he's going through 25 women and, like, fooling around with 25 different women. And that always kind of, like, I guess it's just dating, but when they're all aware of them all seeing him and, they have these intimate moments, and it's just in my mind, I found it hard to believe you could find true love like that. But, hey, that's what, America's been watching for the last 20 years, stuff like that. Talk shows, morning talk shows. Never understood it, I mean, I just see it all being things of an era. I don't see talk shows and reality TV being something we watch 50 to 70 years from now. God willing, we're all still here. I don't. I just don't see that. I see the world. I'm happy when I see a lot more people doing podcasts, and God willing, I'm trying to get my own off the ground. And the podcasts are cool because you're hearing people in a raw environments that they pretty much probably engineered themselves in their studios, in their basements, garages, home, rooms, whatever. And they decorate them custom to what they feel is relating to their self and their personality. And that's beautiful to me. They have guests, they have friends, family, celebrities, great minds of our time that offer their words. And I think it is definitely the social medication that we all need right now, because we're getting to a point where there's so many podcasts, and it's the way that the direction of free speech is moving that you can find one that suits you and roll with it. You can listen with somebody that speaks to you and speaks to other people like-minded to you. And that's a beautiful thing, no matter what side of the fence you're on. But, I see the world going more in that direction, and it certainly helps with opening some people's eyes to the obvious wool that's been pulled over with some stuff that's just obvious. I'm not saying this was fake or that was fake or this was true and that was true, but there's definitely one or two subjects throughout the day with certain reporting, with certain facts that you're just like, really? And I guess I don't have the name though, then you just pick it out of a hat these days. There's plenty to chew the fat on, but that's just my take on it. My point with my own podcast is to just give you the perspective of a person that's pretty much an everyday Joe. I'm a mechanic. I'd like to say I got a decent verse in culture and arts and appreciation for history and world history, American history, music, art in every form, and a good balance of humanity to go with it, and an idea of what's right and wrong, things that are being reported that are wrong, things that are being reported that could be helpful and right, but I think nonetheless things like podcasts are a positive thing for consumption. I really do. I think that's the way the world's going. I think that mainstream news outlets will dissolve in the next 15 to 20 years because they just can't keep up with the rawness of what people are, able to do through YouTube and other platforms. And here in America, God willing, we'll be able to keep doing these things and being able to speak our mind to some capacity in a rational and respectful way. And that's how I feel on that. I also think that shows like I think the History Channel is nothing like it used to be in the early 2000s when it was kind of launched, I guess, in that time in 1998 or something. It used to be a lot of World War II documentaries. They had Modern Marvels. They had all these great programs that I grew up watching, and it was just bizarre because you never got that feeling of an ulterior motive. It was literally a channel devoted to history because people liked to watch history. And yeah, I'm guessing there was ratings involved and this and that, but at the end of the day, it was you were educated. Now, you fast forward 20 years or so, and you got shows like American Pickers, Pawn Stars, River Monsters, Log Monsters, friggin', Maine Lobster Monsters, all these different fucking, shows that, I don't even want to say glorify walks of life, but they just create more people to live vicariously through. And honestly, in my mind, the more people that watch these shows and don't get anything out of it, so the network gets their views and their advertisement money, the people on the show get their fame and their money, and we get nothing. We get nothing. At least back in the day, you can get an education. By the end of the night, after 2 beers, you figured out how many nuts and bolts went into building the Chrysler building, how many people welded what, who the fuck did it, and when it was built. And you can go to work the next morning saying that at least you know that, and it's good to know. What if you're playing Trivial Pursuit one day with your family and friends, and that's a question? That's getting something out of it. You're a little more informed. But these days, it's all about vicarious living. Instagram, social media platforms, it's more or less the same thing, only that has an element of being able to pretend to be somebody else, which is a whole nother scary thing. But that's true too. But yeah, I started to not believe in those shows because of that. It's hard. It's hard these days to find something of value, You really do have to go to YouTube. If you want to, find out a documentary, see on how the Tenerife tragedy plane crash took place and how you'd have to go to YouTube. There's shows still on but it's funny because my grandmother and I, when we watch TV, she's 86 now, and we always joke because we go back to the classic TV channel, which was MeTV, I believe, here in the Northeast. Out of 800 channels we pay for, out of Wi-Fi we pay for, we end up going right back to the classics, to Bonanza, to the Waltons, one of my personal favorites. Little House on the Prairie, Perry Mason, Cannon the Detective, Columbo. These people, these shows are just timeless because even then, yeah, there's an element of it's a TV show, but the characters are way more inspiring because they were from all walks of life. They weren't all, they weren't. If you look, they weren't all underwear models or Victoria's Secret models. They had flaws. They had things they had to overcome. Frank Cannon was a really fat detective, but he had this beautiful confidence, and he was well dressed and tough and can handle himself. And there was a contrast, and they had black and white and Chinese or Japanese Americans on these shows like Quincy MD. There was Sam, his assistant, Jack Klugman's assistant, and he was a Japanese American, I believe. And you just didn't think anything of it. There was no forced racial, mix of people. Back then, to me, watching these shows, as a younger person, it just didn't seem as forced, You watch the old Dean Martin roasts. Everyone's making fun of each other, Sammy Davis Jr. takes a joke. Dean Martin takes a joke. Muhammad Ali's on as a guest, he takes a joke, or, Milton Berle, whatever. Everyone was just laughing. I'm not saying, maybe today people find stuff more offensive. And, I understand. It's a different world these days, perhaps, but it just seems to me that things back then were a lot less forced, and the variety you saw in cast and TV back then was almost on par with today, with a more natural element, and it's just incredible because you'll never hear about this in mainstream discussion. They'll never bring this to your attention. It never will. And it's just bizarre. But they'll go out of their way to highlight how many times Joe Rogan said the N-word. out of, and it wasn't even in that context, but it's just sick that there's these kind of games being played. And when there's these kind of games being played, you know that truth is not the ultimate goal for some people. And that's just talking from a neutral standpoint. Pretend I'm just a neutral person, I mean, on everything in the world. If I'm a neutral essence, I'm not even a person, just a neutral voice, that's how I would interpret that. At some point you gotta wonder if there's an ulterior motive. And it's just food for thought, people. Again, I'm not trying to sway anyone either way. I'm all about love, and I'm all about giving every person from any creed, color, class, language, background, I'm all about giving everyone that equal chance with me, because we're all human beings. And, if you're a kind person, if you have good intentions and a good heart, then I don't see anything else you need to put down on the application. You're a brother or a sister of mine, you're a friend of mine. You identify as this, then you're still a friend. Friend's a universal term as far as I'm concerned. So that's just food for thought, and that's my personal opinion. I don't force it on anybody, but